employees are having trouble accepting a new management staff.
Malibu.
But, you know, they'll get over it.
We'll start when Twyla gets back.
We're all different, and there'll be changes.
Thank you. Yes. Everybody ready?
Yep.
Okay. Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Twyla.
Council Garrison?
Present.
Council Lunt?
Here.
Council McTevier?
Here.
Council Bickford?
Here.
Council Ward?
Here.
Council Pesky?
Here.
Council Brunel?
Here.
Thank you. And the first item, please.
Is department presentations, the Public Works presentation.
Okay, and that's Ryan.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me do this at our council workshop. Makes it a little easier. And also just before we go on the tour, I think it'll be great to be able to go through this, kind of give you an idea of what we do, and then when you guys come out and do the tour on the 22nd, I believe, just have a chance to see what we're talking about. I'd like to thank Twyla for helping me with some of the history I used in putting this together, and just kick it off with what the definition of public works is based on some information I found from the American Public Works Association. And think of it, public works is roads. We all kind of think of that, and snow removal and whatnot. But it's really a combination of everything, including physical assets, how we manage the assets that we have, policies, procedures, and then the personnel utilized to provide a service to the public. In 1974, Lisbon hired their first public works director. He was hired to be in charge of planning, organizing, and directing highway functions, sewer operations, solid waste disposal, and other miscellaneous functions. And Twyla was able to provide me with some information that in 1951, the town manager was originally named the road commissioner and was responsible for the highway department. And it wasn't until 1975 when they appointed Al Dume as public works director that they changed the model to something similar to what we have now. It's currently the way we're structured. I report directly to the town manager. We got the various divisions of public works with the highway operations, solid waste operations, and then sewer operations, and the various employees that make up those different departments. I'll start off with the highway department. And I think everybody's this time of year knows what public works is doing. And quite honestly, of all the four seasons, winter operations is the most difficult as far as I'm concerned, because it's very unpredictable. It's very difficult to make everybody happy. And we're trying to get a lot of work done with some pretty thin budgets. Currently we have about 70 miles of roads that are split into 7 different routes. Takes roughly 2 to 3 hours depending on the storm per route. We also have 4, call them pickup routes, and we do municipal parking lots, some of the smaller roads, dirt roads, dead-end roads, town buildings, as well as cleaning up intersections when they can. And then the biggest thing that we took on a couple years ago, which I think has been more of a curse than anything else, is clearing the sidewalks. That process is difficult. The equipment takes a beating, and it's one of those processes that I think if we could have gone back to contracting, we probably would have stayed with contracting. And we're moving into the spring season. A lot of the time is spent sweeping and cleaning up all the sand we put down in the wintertime. We do have damage to address, whether it be lawns or just debris that may have been taken down during the winter. Summertime is really, we just get done whatever we've budgeted for that year, if possible. The last few years we haven't done much for paving, and that's hopefully something that's going to change. We obviously assist with the Moxie Festival and do pretty much bunch of different projects for whatever, every department needs for help. And then once we roll in the fall, we're basically turning right around and getting ready for winter time. So, I mean, if you look at it, winter is really the driving force of the department. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we try to get done in the summertime, and Public Works has accomplished a lot for capital projects, including trail work and some of the sidewalk extensions and the different road projects we've done over the years. In addition, they're responsible for year-round trash removal from the town buildings and the downtown areas and in the trails. We have 2 mechanics, and they're responsible for basically we had them counted up, around 71 units throughout the operation, and that's for Public Works, Solid Waste, Police, Fire, Parks, I mean the whole 9 yards. So they're very busy all the time, and sometimes our maintenance takes a little bit of a back seat because we're fixing someone else who's come in with an emergency. Just provided a list of our current highway equipment, and if you look at it, if you take out the 1988 tow-behind air compressor, which the Water Department I think uses more than the Public Works Department, you got an average age of equipment of about 2003. So we're dealing with equipment that's getting up there in age and has become more and more costly to maintain. And in case of the Sterlings, is going to be even more difficult as we move forward, as they're becoming obsolete. And that 1996 trackless has been a money pit for us. It's a very expensive piece of equipment to operate. Some of the goals and objectives for the Highway Department as we move forward is to develop our road surface management system. Currently, purchased software is very, very reasonable through the Maine Local Road Center. A bunch of communities use it. And the idea is we put in our do pavement assessments. That information is put into the system, and then we can do customized reports as well as utilize that to help come up with a budget for our pavement management. This coming summer, there's new regulatory warning sign management plan is required to be in place, and that basically says that you need to go around and either inspect your stop signs, legal notice signs and whatnot, so that they are properly reflective at night. There's a couple different options through the regulation where you can go and identify if the sign is good enough to leave in place, which is kind of silly. A lot of them have a lifespan, so the thing for us to do is to try to get on a replacement plan where we're replacing all our signs within 10 years, because I believe that's the lifespan of the manufacturer's lifespan of the signs. We have also been working on developing standard operating procedures and means of tracking what we're doing with equipment, materials, and labor through all the seasons that we have. And the biggest thing that I'd like to see happen that we've been working on some is a more focus on asset management, where we're looking at what we have for people, resources, equipment, and that's everything that we touch with Public Works, including sewer, solid waste, town buildings, and on and on. The next item we've kind of briefly touched on in the past, and it's a new regulation that Lisbon now unfortunately has to follow. And it's the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It's the MS4 program is what it is. And it came about as a result of the Clean Water Act. And I'm not sure, I'm a little hazy on that, but the original Clean Water Act was in the early 1970s. And I'm not sure if they just keep adding on to it or if it's a different act, but it was kind of difficult to tell. But in any case, in 1990, those cities that were over 100,000 had to now basically treat their stormwater system like we treat our sanitary sewer system, and they'd have a permit to be able to discharge from that system. In 1999, some of that started trickling down to the smaller communities. It actually was right around 2000 that we had to Lewiston, Auburn, actually it was a little later on than that, but Lewiston, Auburn, and Sabattis locally, and then there was 28 communities at the time that had to meet these same requirements. A little bit scaled back, but almost to the point where you had to have a permit for discharge. Maine is a delegated state, and the DEP has not forced that on us in terms of actually having a discharge permit like the sewer, where you have to monitor your discharge. But something that may come along in the future. 2010 was when, because of the census, we got dragged into the mix, and currently this is a copy of the regulated area in Lisbon, and you can see that it's basically Lisbon Falls and Lisbon, and then the 196 corridor, and we got dragged in mainly because of where we touched Lewiston and Sabattis and that shaded area in the top left. The permit requires that we meet requirements in that regulated area, but a lot of the requirements that we have to do are, which we'll get into in a little bit, just makes sense to adopt town-wide because it's mostly ordinance type of stuff and stuff associated with construction. The state has got a bunch of different stormwater working groups. There's one in Portland, there's one in Bangor, and then we've got a small group here in Androscoggin with the Auburn, Lewiston, Sabattis, and now Lisbon. And we work together to develop a plan, because the requirement of the permit is that you have a plan on how you're going to meet the permit. And that stormwater management program identifies 6 minimum control measures that we have to meet. And unfortunately, this will just be the first time that I come and talk to you about stormwater management, because one of the major keys that DEP has for us is the education of the town council and planning board and those policy-making folk. I'm going to move on to just to the initial requirements of the permit. We did participate in a Public Works Day a couple years ago, and based on, which was really a decent event to attend, but now that we're going to be forced, that'll be one thing that we will do on an annual basis, is participate with the Androscoggin Valley Soil Stormwater Working Group, and they'll probably be at the Auburn Malls where they've had it the last few times. We have to develop the storm sewer system map, which based on we thought we were going to get pulled into this permit in 2001 or so. I had engineering interns at the time that went through and actually inspected all the 700 and something catch basins in the system, and we put together a map. So we've got a starting point, and we're just going to have to really, I mean, in 10, 15 years is really, things have changed, and just change the technology that we use to generate that map, and we may end up GPSing and whatnot. You can go through and look at a lot of the things that we have to do in the first couple years there. The biggest things for you folks will be just the awareness of the program and the requirements that we have to meet, as well as the fact that there will be ordinances that will have to come to you for adoption. And I got some of the dates up there. January 2015 will be the non-stormwater discharge ordinance, and then June 30th of 2015 we have the post-construction discharge ordinance. And Dennis, where he works with Sabattis as well, he's actually representing Sabattis at the stormwater working group, and he's working with me here to handle kind of the ordinance and inspection components of that, and then the public works part of it we'll deal with. One of the things for us to consider at some point along the way is how we're going to pay for some of these requirements. Lewiston introduced the rain tax, which I don't think they don't technically call it that, but that was originally not well received, but it's been a means for them to finance the work that they have to do. I mean, this really needs to be looked at as similar to the sewer system, where it's an enterprise fund of some sort that we have to support. Jump right into solid waste department. It's kind of neat going back through the history to find out how we got to where we are. And part of it was in 1989, Maine DEP made it mandatory that recycling become effective. And it became effective by ordinance in Lisbon on January 1st, 1989. According to the files that I have, the Pine Woods Road landfill ceased disposal operations in 1990. And in 96 was when the solid waste department was actually established by ordinance. The landfill was closed, capped. In 98 was when it was finished. And initially we had to do monitoring of 5 groundwater wells within the the property on Pinewoods Road, and then there were 10 residential wells, which, based on some information, or based on investigation by the DEP geologist, he recommended that we didn't have to monitor the 10 private wells anymore, and that only if a new well was put in out in that area, that then we'd have to start monitoring that. It's just showing you a map of the closed landfill with the monitoring wells. 10 you can see up top are along Pinewoods Road, and then the 5 that are around the closed cells at the landfill. Now the guys at the transfer station, their primary goal is to assist the citizens when they come to dispose of their trash and make sure it's going in the right place so we can recycle as much as we can and just be able to take everything where it needs to go. They do collect fees, and that's for the yard items primarily, because dump stickers are sold here at the town office now. We annually transport about 4,500 tons of material, and that's everything listed up there. I mean, bulky waste, I'll get to the next slide in a second. And then they're constantly filling the balers with cardboard paper and whatnot and making bales to be stored for pickup at a later date. We've been very fortunate in the last couple of years to replace some trailers that were in very sad shape at the transfer station, that being the Manic Hardock steel demolition dump trailer is the new wood trailer, and it's worked out very well. The wood doesn't come out quite as slick as we had hoped it would. But we have budgeted to put in a liner, which will help us as far as that's concerned. And then the new J&J compacting trash trailer we received this past, I want to say December. That case loader was actually one that was at Public Works, and we had shifted it up there when we got the new Kawasaki, and that's, I think, probably be our routine as we move forward based on the way it's utilized. Very difficult slide because based on the information that's there, but you can see 12-year recycling history, and if you just look at the bottom, the total weight in tons, the thing that catches my attention is that originally in 2002, transporting roughly 7,500 cubic tons, 7,500 tons, and now we're down to just over 4,200. And I'll be honest, I don't know what that tells us. I don't know if it's that there's just less trash being generated, if it's just that, you know, the fees have scared people away. I don't know what the rhyme or reason to that is, but that's been the trend, and it's been a consistent trend since 2002. In the same regards, our revenues have kind of bounced all over the place, and it's based strictly on what's coming and going. Can't mess with going back with the slide, but if one of the big things may be the loss of Knight Celotex and Miller Industries, and Dingley Press isn't bringing us as much anymore as well. When the state isn't much different than municipalities in terms of cutbacks, and we hadn't received a state report in a while. Marcel was able to provide me with some information, but it was a couple years old. But at the time, Lisbon's recycling rate is around 60%, where the state average has only been about 40%. So that's really kind of a big positive for us. Our goals at the transfer station are just to maintain our equipment replacement schedule. The last 2 trash trailers, we really kind of went a little longer than we should have. And I don't know if it's just the maintenance of the trailers up till then, but they basically rotted out. We would like to figure out a different way to collect fees at the transfer station. We did, I guess, Wayne Ricker gave me some of these old punch cards I guess we used to use. We have talked about the idea of going back to a punch card system. People could buy the punch cards here, and then that way we're not dealing with collecting revenue or collecting cash at the transfer station. We've thrown around the idea of a scale system. I think it's been thrown around for years. It would really be the most accurate way of measuring what people are bringing to us, so that way we're charging them accurately, and then we're not being, you know, well, that looks like 3 yards, and then we end up having 5 yards. So just some things for us to consider working on. Next department I'd like to chat about would be the sewer department. Sewer department is probably, other than the town engineer, has been the department I've been most involved with since I started here. And the department started as of anything else because of regulation. And in 1972 was when the Clean Water Act was passed and when we needed to start separating our sanitary sewer from our stormwater, because at the time everything just went to the river. So we had to build pump stations and build a treatment plant, and the treatment plant was built in the early 70s and went online around late 74 and into 75. And the goal of the whole thing, as you know, is clean water. As you get going through what the process is at the treatment plant, you'll see why this has been so effective. But our wastewater discharge license is due for renewal in 2015, which means this year we'll be working on that process. We need to apply to renew our license. There'll be some additional testing that we need to do at the river and at the treatment plant, and hopefully they don't change our parameters. From the mid-70s till 93, the sewer department was a town department operated by the municipality, and in 93 the town decided to go to a private contract operation. Excuse me, Whitman and Howard was the firm that was elected to do that. It stayed that way until 2006, when finally convinced the council that we could probably do it cheaper in-house again. We had good staff, and we ended up transitioning back to a municipally operated sewer department, and saved the town. Well, at the time, it was around $120,000 savings that we realized. Going back to the treatment plant, talk about some of the upgrades since the original construction in 1974. The fine bubble upgrade, which happened in 2002, was probably one of the best things that did happen. At the time, the town was experiencing odor complaints, significant odor complaints, and that was a result of the equipment that had been in operation since '74. The new system is a fine bubble aeration, which is basically a bunch of PVC pipes at the bottom of the aeration tanks, and it hooked to a blower, and air bubbles up through, provides oxygen to the system, as well as mixing all that stuff that's in there, which you'll see on the 22nd when you show up. In 2006, we added a headworks facility. I really didn't put them in order, did I? In 1990, we constructed the new clarifiers, as well as a new sludge dewatering building, and part of that sludge dewatering building we upgraded in 2003 with the installation of the centrifuge. We removed a belt filter press, which was basically, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but for me it looked like an old paper machine, and it was basically just squeezed the material together and got the water out and left you with a nice sloppy, cakey mess. And most of that for a while was land applied and then composted locally. The centrifuge is a completely enclosed system, and it does a much better job of removing the water, so we end up not paying for disposal of water. We're paying just for the disposal of the sludge. In 2006, we installed the headworks facility, which was a new building, and it had a screen system, as well as a grit removal system, which helped just get some of the stuff out of the process before everything ended up in the aeration tank. We do have a collection system that's comprised of 38 miles of sewer and 12 pump stations, and the list of equipment we have is kind of modest compared to some of the other departments, but other than the 2014 Freightliner Vector, which we're very happy to receive. And I'll get a picture of that a little bit later on. From a daily routine, lab work is done on a schedule. Some of the work is done 7 days a week. Some of the work is done just 3 days a week, depending on what's going on. The first 4 items are done on a daily basis. Feel free to ask any questions if you want details on some of this. But the biggest thing that's done is the testing on the total suspended solids, as well as the BOD. That's telling us what we have in the system, as well as what's coming into us, and then ultimately how we're doing at removal. Over the years, we've we run roughly 8 to 10,000 pounds of material in the system, and we have about a 95 to 99% removal rate based on the difference of the BOD strength of the wastewater coming in versus what's going out. We have to have an 85% removal per our permit, so we've done very well as far as that's concerned. Some of the other items they do on a daily basis is just to check pretty much all the systems, but then get an idea of how much, how deep the sludge blankets are on the clarifiers, if they determine if they have to waste or not. And then the additional requirements through the summer months are chlorinating our effluent, as well as doing an E. coli testing 3 days a week. The picture on the left is the centrifuge. It's that enclosed system that our percentages change from roughly around 14% dryness of the cake, I guess, of the sludge, to over 20% with the centrifuge, which just significantly decreased the amount of material we were paying to get rid of. The picture on the right is one I stole from Hawk Ridge, which is the compost facility that we are under contract with. They come and haul our sludge can once a week and haul it up to Unity, where it's made into a better product, put it that way. In addition to the work at the treatment plant, we do have pump station inspections that are done on some pump stations are checked daily, some pump stations are checked 3 times a week, depending on, it's based on the size of them. There's 3 of them that are our big 3, if you will, that are checked on a daily basis. Float switches checked and cleaned when necessary, and then the standby generators are exercised automatically once a week. The sewer line cleaning is the big buildup in the spring and into the summer. We try to clean the system once a year. Start at the furthest line from every pump station and work their way towards that pump station, and then they vacuum out whatever debris is too big to send down the line. Some of the miscellaneous items there, cleaning the contact chambers on a quarterly basis. That's a process that used to take quite a while. Guys have done quite a few improvements at the treatment plant, and one of them was to install some piping that allows them to pump down the contact chambers a lot quicker, because they're not setting up the pump and then running hoses everywhere. And it's made things a lot quicker. That was usually done less often, and now it's done on a more regular basis. This is not a very good picture, but a picture of the new sewer truck. And that was the day, I think the day we actually took it, we took delivery of it. The biggest things that we're focused on this year is the collection system condition assessment. We've been working on that a little bit at a time for the last several years. It seems like the more we inspect, the more we find we need to address right away. And most of that inspection is done internally with a camera done by a third-party contractor. And with the new truck and the work that we're going to need to do with as a result of the stormwater permit, as well as just the regular work we need to do with the sewer system, is we're going to need to come up with a way to dump that truck and get rid of the debris. We budgeted for that. We've got several different options that we're evaluating and trying to figure out what's the best fit for us. As I mentioned, the 2015 permit renewal will take us quite a bit of time. The town engineer position was originally created in 1992, and it turns out I'm only the 2nd town engineer. It's kind of cool. And the role of that position was to assist the town manager on a variety of different technical issues. In addition to town buildings, trails, and capital projects, some of the projects that we've worked on I've worked on over the past of the Pine Woods Road ball fields construction. We had a contaminated well remediation project, as the big one on Route 9, and another smaller one we did recently. And then we're working with different agencies on the partial removal of the upper dam. When it comes to town buildings, there are basically 10 locations in town with about 20 structures. We currently have preventative maintenance contracts in place for our HVA systems, as well as we've either repaired or replaced cleaned up or replaced the communication systems at most of the major buildings. The MTM Center, when we took that, was we've had quite a few projects there that have been fun to be a part of. The ADA ramps and entrance doors were a requirement based on some mishaps. The boiler replacements and roof replacement were two of the bigger projects, and then the ongoing window replacement. I think everybody's seen what that's worked out to be. As most of you know, we do have the energy savings performance contract that we're working on with the school department, and those are some of the things that we will at least be discussing as part of that contract. Doubtful that many of them will be included, but it's just the list goes on of the stuff we need to do with our aging infrastructure. The library brick rehabilitation project is one that's we've been piecemealing along as we can afford it, and then the public works salt shed is going to need to be replaced probably sooner rather than later. We need something bigger and that doesn't leak. Technology is, I'm sure you're all aware, especially Mr. Garrison playing with his iPad, has come a long way. Here, when I started, there was minimal dial-up connectivity from the town office, and it was one person on at a time. And we've gone from that to a system where all the town buildings are linked back here to the town office. They use the centralized server to access our financial software for doing purchase orders and keeping an eye on their budgets and whatnot. And last year we did the upgrade at the police department to install a server and a network at that location. The servers we installed here are due to be replaced, and that'll be one of our biggest priorities as we discuss moving forward with the budget. One of the other things we've looked at is transitioning to a thin client technology, which is, ironically enough, is like going back to when they had a green screen on the counter with a keyboard, because it's a dummy box on the computer on your desktop, and you're doing all your work on the server. Those thin clients are a lot cheaper to buy, and they have a lot longer lifespan, rather than buying a computer for every desk, basically. The public use computers at the library see an awful lot of use, and they're ones that, to keep Diane happy, will definitely have a high on the priority list. And ultimately, our goal is just to maintain our system the way our infrastructure has come a long way. Our downtime has been minimized, and it's been a lot more productive. Trails have probably been the most fun I've had, and the history there says a lot about what it takes to get from a concept back in 1999 when the Trails Commission was created, and ultimately the feasibility study in 2001 to where we are now with the Androscoggin River Trail scheduled to be completed this summer. I think I have a map on the next page. See the map on the left is kind of small, but it shows once the section's completed on the right, the trail network that we have in Lisbon is going to be second to probably none. I'm a little bit biased, so we do need to finish the trail itself. There was only enough funding to construct from the boat launch to the intersection with Blethyn Street and Davis Street. The sidewalk project will be something that we have to look at maybe doing with Public Works and funding locally. And then it's planning for additional trail amenities and where do we go from here as far as connections to other communities. So basically, Lisbon isn't much different than a lot of public and private institutions where we're being forced to continually evaluate how we do business. And we've got I think we're on the right path as far as how we're organized and what we're trying to do. The biggest thing is keeping in mind the value of the infrastructure that we have and what we need to invest in it to make sure it stays with us versus going back to. I mean, not budgeting any money for paving has been difficult, and it's shown in the roads that we have. So we need to keep focusing on that infrastructure and making the improvements that we can afford. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
I don't think you would expect to go away without questions from me.
No. not at all.
Well, first off, Ryan, thank you for presenting that. There was a lot of great information there, and I took a lot of notes. In regard to staffing, how many people do you have down at Public Works, including your mechanics, everyone involved in Public Works?
I have to go back to my. Talking about at the highway department?
Yes.
2, 6, 7 full-time,
Okay.
8, 9 full-time, sorry, mechanics.
Do you have part-time as well?
We have very part-time, like 12 hours a week, part-time. There's and that's split up between 2 individuals.
What about sewer department?
5,
Okay. And about transfer?
2 full-time and 2 part-time.
And then looking at your chart here, which caught my eye with the revenues as we had talked about, it looks like 2011, 2012, 2013, it was about a $27,000 shortfall. How is it going this year? Do you see we're on track to beat the 113,000 we had last year?
I'll be honest, I have not reviewed the revenues
Okay.
with Jessica.
That's okay. And then, in regards to the new trail that we're currently starting, what will the role of Public Works be with that trail?
In terms of after it's completed,
In terms of construction, are they going to have any part of that?
that project is nearing 50% completion already, and we have no involvement with that other than
Okay.
inspection services. And that's been minimal at this point.
Okay. And then, does Public Works and the school department have some like a joint relationship with? I know they don't plow, but when it comes to construction, do they reference Public Works to do stuff for them?
They've generally hired Public Works staff outside of normal working hours to do projects for them, and we've assisted them based on the needs that come up in direction from the manager.
Do you find you're supporting them a lot of time, or?
Probably not as much as they'd like us
Yeah.
to help out.
So if you had the staffing, there'd be more opportunities for you to support them.
Definitely.
Okay. And my last question I have, you talked about the regulatory and warning sign management plan. Do you have an estimate of costs that will be? Do you think it'll be very minimal, or?
Not at this point, because quite honestly, I mean, it was something that I learned about in probably November.
Okay.
And we need to look at what we have, and see, and some of them, it depends. It depends on the signs you buy. Some of them on the back, they have a date of when they were manufactured, and we can go off that, but we have to actually go out and look at them.
So that has to be done by June of 14 this
We
year?
need to just have a plan in place.
Okay.
We don't have to have everything. We just have to have a plan on how we're gonna manage that aspect of the business.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Your road system
Yep.
software, where are you at on that?
We bought it in just before it started snowing, and the operations manager started to go out and do condition assessments based on the manual that was provided. There's forms in there, then you can go out and just, identify a road segment from point A to point B, and then split up each road up based on the condition. So if you've got Bodenham Road from point A to point B is a different condition than the middle of it. You identify those segments, and then we can input that into the system.
Ballpark idea how long it's going to take to
Well, it'll be this summer.
this summer?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I have a couple of questions. When you were talking about the sidewalks, the sidewalk clearing in the wintertime, we know that there have been some problems with I call it the little Tonka truck, with the little sidewalk clearing unit. As you know, in the future, we're hoping to have more sidewalks to open up foot traffic, and what kind of impact do you think that'll have on Public Works? Do you think we'll move toward a different system for that, or what do you think you have in mind?
Quite honest, I mean, we've taught to other communities, and some of them have gone away from the style that we had and have come back. I think the biggest thing for us is we bought, at the time, a used machine that was probably a lot more worn out than we're led to believe, because we've basically spent more time rebuilding it than not. And that's just where we're at. I mean, it's what was the decision that was made at that time, and we're stuck with it now. That has a little less impact on Public Works staff themselves, because it's we hire a part-timer that comes in and operates that piece of equipment.
What do most communities do for that, if they don't have their own unit?
I'd have to, because I'm familiar with the local one, with Lewis and Auburn,
Yeah.
they do it, but I know some places it's the responsibility of the business or the property owner that's adjacent to it.
Okay, and when you were talking about the regulatory and warning sign management plan being inspected, do we already have a plan in place for that, or that's something that you're working on?
That's something that we have to work
Okay.
on. As well as the stormwater,
Right.
which is the big one.
Well, that was the next one I was going to ask you about, because that's the NPDES permitting, right?
That would be for the sewer. That's the
Okay.
sewer department
Okay.
permitting part of it.
So you said that hopefully they won't change their parameters, but I was wondering what sorts of things are you doing to make sure that when we get to that point, what kind of steps are we taking now to assure that in advance we're going to be ready for that?
There's not much that we can do as far as that's concerned. The one, and it's different. It's based on the receiving waters of our discharge, which is the Androscoggin River, and not much has changed there from the last time we did our permit. I mean, we went through it in 2010, I guess, was the last time it was renewed. But it's phosphorus has been the big word that people talk about, and whether or not we're going to have to, they'll lower our limits as far as the phosphorus that we can discharge. And we haven't even really scratched the surface as far as starting that process, because we're just now getting going on that.
Okay. And then I was wondering, when you brought up the window replacement project at the MTM Center, that's been an ongoing project, and it's noticeable every time another part of that project is done. What's our projected finish date for that?
I'd have to go back and count how many sections are left. It costs about $15,000 per section, and I, off the top of my head, I can't remember how many are left.
Okay.
But if we're only budgeting around $15,000 a year.
How many
I mean,
more?
our goal is, the biggest thing with this energy conservation contract is that if supposedly once they evaluate all the town buildings, all the school stuff, and they come back to us with some recommendations, we're hoping that that project will get wrapped into there. But if not, the goal this past year, I think we only budgeted around $10,000, and that was for us to try to do the gym, the front of the gym at MTM, because then that would tie that whole front of the building would be done, and then we could start picking away again, going back the other side along Addison Street.
Right. Okay. And when you were talking about the work that's been done on the police server, the police department server, and the upgrade, is that 100% complete? Are we done with that project?
I believe so. It's something that one, well, it was paid for through the technology budget. The police IT guy has pretty much been coordinating with SimQuest, who's our IT software support provider, I guess.
Okay.
Or at least software support.
I have one final question.
Yes.
Are you going to provide face masks and air fresheners for us on the 22nd?
Not necessary. We won't need them.
Okay. All right. Anyone
I had a
else?
question, yes.
Okay.
Going back to the sidewalks.
Yep.
Did you say they used to contract that out?
We did.
Would it be an option to go back to that again, or, 'cause you said that's a costly thing.
To the person that was doing it, I don't know, last time I talked to him about it, he wasn't too thrilled about the way that ended up being handled, but I don't know. We haven't I mean, evaluated,
Would it be worthwhile?
we were spending 30 to 40,000 a year to have it done. Right now, we're not spending nearly that, but we're getting the complaints, I guess. I mean, that was the difference. It was, when he did it, I mean, the family had been doing it for
Long
how
time.
long?
Long time.
Like
Mr. Morgan.
decades and decades. So, I mean, it is not, that job is not one that anybody wants to do, because it's generally the absolute worst time of night. You don't know where the sidewalk is. The machine, we've made some improvements this year. Biggest thing we did was change the tires, which has given him some better traction, but I mean, he rides around. Last winter, we didn't go out very often because it was an easier winter. This year, he's been out quite a bit more often, and we've left it that he goes out and runs it just when it needs to be run. In the past, if the guys had come back from dealing with a storm, and gotten some rest, then they'd go out and we would run it ourselves. But it's just been, if we can get one person to get more time, get more familiar with the route, get more familiar with all the obstacles along the way, then the better off we'll be. I mean, ultimately, if we can get a machine that's not broken all the time and a person that can stay in it on a regular basis, I mean, it will be more cost effective for us to do it, but it's just,
But it's still
We've
cheaper
had-
for us doing it
yeah.
now than it was
I mean,
contracted.
again, I mean, the contract, I believe, back then was 30 to 40,000, and there's no way, I mean, we bought the machine for that, so maybe a little more.
Is that the unit that they replaced the transmission on last year?
They've done so much, so I don't remember if it did the
Yeah, it was.
transmission or not.
They had to replace transmission.
I think when we did our tour, it was down. And that's what
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been down a lot.
Ryan, what is the estimated completion or the estimated date of when the trail will be done?
You're really gonna make,
I won't hold you to it, but I'm just
the
wondering.
original substantial completion date was June of 2014. There were some issues with contract language between DOT and some of the requirements that they had, which were not in place at the time that we bid the project, which resulted in delays as we negotiated that with the contractor. That pushed the completion date out to the end of August at this point. Substantial completion, I mean, they'll come back, that means it's done. I mean, other than dressing up loom, seed, and some of that kind of stuff. But it should be done by the end of August. The way they're going now, it could be done earlier than that, but the way that project started, we entered our original agreement with DOT in 2010, and we didn't break ground until November of 2013.
Now that trail is going to come down to the end of Davis Street, correct?
Correct.
It's not going to go all the way down to Miller's, but it's going to end at the wood line on Davis Street.
Exactly. And then the goal there, I mean, Davis Street's low traffic, wide, relatively safe for pedestrians that want to continue down, or that are going to walk from that end. But ultimately, we'll end up hopefully building a sidewalk along that section. And I know that the Y96 Master Planning Committee has looked at means of funding that.
What was that dollar amount you said again for that sidewalk?
Sidewalk portion
Yes,
was,
I forgot.
it was bid at 46,000, 47,000 from the contractor. 13,000 of that is something that has to be done regardless, and that's because it's related to the stormwater permit that we received. It's a Filterra system or something along those lines. We have to install that.
So if we want to complete that to connect it to somewhere in Lisbon, we should account for about $50,000 to get that complete, you would think?
Closer to probably closer to 30, and then if Public Works does it, I mean, we budget for their time anyway, and that's something that we haven't done historically is bill Public Works time to wherever they're working or whatever project they're working on. If it's straight time hours, it gets billed to Public Works. If they're working for the sewer department, unless it's overtime, it gets billed to Public Works, and those are the things that, when I was talking about asset management and tracking how we do stuff, I mean, that's the point, is that so we can bill accordingly and then budget accordingly, because it's just right now it's not done that way.
Awesome, thank you.
Everybody all set? Thank you very much, Ryan. This was very informative, and we'll look forward to our tour.
Ryan.
Next item, Twyla?
Is the executive search proposal discussion?
Okay. This is really just a good time for council. We've heard from 3 different organizations. And we just need, I think, to take a look at the 3 different proposals, and even though we felt that they were all pretty much the same on paper, that I think just an open discussion about how we felt about the 3 different presentations would be helpful to us in making that final decision. We're not going to vote tonight. This is a workshop. But if somebody else wants to start the discussion, I'm happy to let them, or I can start. Did anybody have any
I personally
Questions?
like the last one, Eaton Peabody.
microphone?
The last one that was Eaton Peabody that's the one that I was leaning more toward, was between them and Maine Municipal. But from what I saw and what I liked was the last one that we had spoken to.
Was it just a feeling of, like a rapport that you felt,
It's-
or?
Yeah, and the other one's from New Hampshire, so I figured this one is closer. I think it would be easier, more accessible, even though they're still doing something. One of the gentlemen is acting as an intern, but I'm thinking that they'll still be able to do what they need to do and fulfill our needs. Just my thought on it.
Roger? Or?
After a long process of discussion with people, Eaton Peabody's would be my choice too. They said some stuff that I was, piqued my interest right off the bat,
Mm-hmm.
so. I liked them, so we'll go with that, I guess. That's where I'd go.
Mark, did you?
I mean, my preference is either of the 2 firms. I think I'd prefer over MMA, just, get a totally outside perspective, something that's not, tied to their group of people. And I think either of those 2 firms would do a good job. I just want to make sure if we go with Eaton Peabody, we want to make sure that we're actually contracting to get the services of, one of the former managers there who really knows their stuff, and it's not going to be done by interns or something.
That's a good point.
Just, if Don Garish is real busy, I know, working in Wiscasset, I don't want to find out we spend 4 months on this project and then, some intern did all the work and we're not happy with the, results we get.
Right. Dylan?
I agree with you that Municipal Resources out of New Hampshire or Eaton and Peabody would both be great fits. 2 concerns with Eaton and Peabody that I have is one with the time commitment that Don Garish has with Wiscasset, which they stated that they could complete the task. So they know their schedule better than we do. Now, the other piece that has me thinking is when Mr. Houston was serving as intern town manager for 2 weeks. I had talked to him about this just to get his expertise, and he stated that Eaton and Peabody would end up being right around $10,000 because there's expenses involved that would cost us more. Reading their proposal, I did not see that, but that's something that I kept in back of my mind as he did share that with me. So if that is true, that would be about $5,000 more than the other 2 firms. But if we went with Municipal Resources or Eaton and Peabody, I would support either of them. I think they'd both do a good job for us.
Thank you. Greg?
I'll echo what Dylan said. Pretty much, I would also go with either one of the firms. I like the first gentleman from Municipal Resources, although they are out of New Hampshire. My biggest concern with Eaton Peabody is time. Are they gonna have the manpower and the time to, give us 100%? And there's cost. The nice thing about the first gentleman was, they give us a guarantee. Doesn't work out, they'll do it all over again, no cost.
Another piece to add to that, it'll be last night at the Utilities Committee meeting, met with the gentleman from Municipal Resources out of New Hampshire, and they're going to be providing the council and the water commissioners with a outline or a draft of an agreement, possibly, that they would come in and study to see if some combining resources would work for Lisbon with the utilities. So I don't know if they are going to be in town for that, if this would work out or be too much for them, I'm not sure, but that's something to keep in back of your mind as well.
Thank you.
We'll be getting that in 2 weeks, that contract.
Chris, did you want to weigh in?
I was just, Eaton Peabody is who I was leaning toward myself. And again, it's a time factor thing that when they said Don Garish is presently interning somewhere else, it makes you go, okay, same idea, they're gonna have enough time. That was my choice.
I think, thank you, Chris. I think that I'm hearing time and in terms of commitment and cost as another factor. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't ask Eaton Peabody about that and make sure that we're clear on it. So we can ask them about that. And I think that, in all fairness, we should ask the other two organizations as well, to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples.
I think we've already ruled out MMA right across the board. I don't think you need to ask them.
And I think, for myself, I didn't actually rule them out so much as consider how many other towns that they're committed to helping right now, and wondering about their larger goal as an organization, where where Municipal Resources and Eaton Peabody, this is what they do pretty mainly.
Last night, the gentleman that represented the first one, they do a lot of, all the way from Connecticut up through. They do a lot of towns in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut. They've got to be stretched pretty thin themselves. They didn't say that, but didn't you get that? That they were doing a lot in Massachusetts and they were doing a lot in Connecticut?
They do, but I think I can't remember the
bigger
exact
staff.
number, but they
Bigger
have a staff that's as much as I have it work for at Target. They have a big staff, so I don't know.
And as in Eaton Peabody, that the one that's interning in Wiscasset, is he a part-time intern?
Oh, the interim manager?
Right.
That-
So he's just doing
Yes.
part-time, so he's not full-time as an intern manager there.
3 days a week.
So he's not completely tied. And I don't think he would have offered his services if they couldn't do it.
I agree.
Then we'll ask Mr. Olmsted, if, can you just draft a note to all three of those organizations for us, and our concerns, as I see it, are do they have the time and commitment to give to us, and the additional the costs in addition to the contract cost, would they be in line with each other? So what would they estimate, if, for a town like Lisbon, what would they estimate that, they must have a pretty good idea of how much it would cost for photocopying and traveling and advertising and things like that. So if
I'm sure they have an off-the-shelf sheet they'll pull out.
Yep. So if we can just ask all three organizations, just to keep the field fair, and if you can just get back to us with that information, we will plan to vote at our next council meeting on the 18th. In the meantime, if you could just make sure that we all have that information, so that we can make the best possible decision, I think.
So those figures that they gave us does not include the advertising? or
That's
any of
right.
that?
No, they all
There
say
it said-
advertising is extra.
Yeah, it said certain stuff costs extra.
I have a feeling, just like the contract price coming out pretty much the same within $100, that the estimate for those costs is probably gonna come out pretty much the same, but no sense in assuming. We might as well just find out. And
MMA says they have a lot of their copying, travel, background are all in their estimate, but advertising is extra. Eaton Peabody, additional reimbursement for mileage and printing, advertising is additional, and municipal resources didn't mention reimbursable costs.
so I think it's a good idea to find out. And once we find out, if we see what all three organizations say, and we can have a little bit of discussion before we take a vote on next Tuesday.
And do all three of them have some sort of guarantee?
No, the first organization, Municipal
Only one.
Resources, had a guarantee.
They guarantee if he doesn't fit, if the individual doesn't fit, was it
1
a
year. 1 year.
1 year, that they will.
Your town
Do it
manager
all
comes
over
with a
again.
one-year warranty.
Yep.
That, of course, has its pros and cons. Municipal
yeah.
Resources also estimated that it would take,
Yeah.
I think, about 2 months longer than anybody else to do the search. So I think,
90 to 120 days.
yeah, so I think,
I think that's right.
we
I
all
mean,
have.
They're
It's
always
3
gonna take
months.
3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
3 to 4
That's
months.
the number, I don't have it right in front of me for the other one.
So we all have copies of those presentations. We can look them over and
Yep.
Evaluating somebody.
take the new information that Mr. Olmsted sends to us, forwards to us, into consideration. And I urge council to talk with each other, and, the old-fashioned phone call goes a long way, so.
I'll try to have the information to you tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, that'd be perfect.
If they want the job, they'll be very responsive.
That's right, they will be fast, won't they? That's great. Any other comments from council before we move forward? Okay, all right, next item, Twyla?
Is the audience questions on topics?
Okay. Do we have any
Discuss.
questions from the audience tonight?
Dorothy Fitzgerald, Lisbon Falls. I was here for all of the presentations, Municipal Resources, Eaton Peabody, and Maine Municipal Association. I don't have a vote, this is my opinion. I was very, very impressed by what the gentleman from Municipal Resources had to say. I was also impressed by Eaton Peabody, maybe not quite as much, but like I said, Municipal Resources, I was very impressed. And may not be either here or there, and it may not even be possible, but I think it would be nice if we could keep if Mr. Olmsted would agree to stay here until the next fiscal year began, through the end of June, through the budget process, and rather than change horses in the middle of the stream, in the middle of the budget process. I just think, to me, it makes sense to keep one person here during the entire budget process, my opinion.
Thank you, Dot. Anyone else?
Steve Warren. I was hoping that Ryan would be here to answer some questions, because I think there are some things that we ought to ask. One of them has to do with what we're just talking about with municipal resources. The Utilities Committee is exploring a contract possibility that would look at things, and one of the primary things would be combining water department functions with sewer department functions and spinning that off into a utility district. And it would be good to know on the front end what Ryan thinks that would do to the Public Works Department, whether there would be any impact that we don't foresee, and we get into the process and we get blindsided by something that wasn't considered. Some of the specifics of what he presented that I think should be asked is where we've had some failures. We should ask who, for instance, on the pump station issue, who does the inspections? I didn't hear anything in his presentation about that, and that's a critical aspect. If the pump stations fail, the system fails, and we end up polluting the environment. The management protocol for identifying the issues, like when the flow drops at a pump station, is there a protocol for processing that into some action rather than let it get to a crisis situation? And also, is there any prioritizing of the sewer line cleaning, or is it just done as a matter of routine? Do we learn anything from the fact that a sewer line ends up having more problems than the rest of the system? Do we still keep just cleaning the same process that we always have instead of having a priority for that? The salt shed leaking seems to have been treated very lightly, and I don't think that's a light issue. I think it should be addressed in terms of it's sitting right on the aquifer. So we have two aquifers that we draw on, and that's one of them. And so that's really something that should be addressed. We have had some problems with that polluting the wells, and those wells are drawing on the aquifer as well, so it's only a matter of time.
Mr. Warren, we do have a 3-minute time limit
okay.
for this. May I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
In keeping with following through and making sure that your questions get answered, I would suggest that you send a synopsis of those questions to Mr. Olmsted's office so that he can direct them and find your answers for you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else? And just to respond also to your question, Mrs. Fitzgerald, you asked if we could keep Mr. Olmsted until June. Well, that will be up to Mr. Olmsted, not up to us. We might like to keep him for a very long time, but I don't. But thank you very much. Okay, and the next item, please.
Was that your council response
Yes, it
already?
was.
I think it's an adjournment then.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion.
And a
Second that.
All those in favor?
Pass 7-0.
Thank you.
Let me turn the cameras on.
I'll vote no on these times, just.
You just want to stay in session. We've gone through all the items, we've got nothing more. We're
Yeah,
just going to
so I can
refuse to
say
adjourn.
no.
Yeah,
Like
would that be
Congress
if
or
it was a
something. They
fair-
refuse to adjourn, so we can't go home.
Eaton Peabody was, all they said was 60-plus days.
Okay.
That was their time frame was 60-plus days.